Okay, guys, this is a little bit of a different video for me. Basically, I found this article, I think about 2 days ago. It's as you can see from the title, if this Hangout is working correctly, it's an Iron Man cover is the latest example of why pinup artists shouldn't draw teenagers. Now, I'm bringing you this, this little live chat here, this little broadcast here through the power of CenturyLink's shitty internet. So if this ends up being a mess, I'll take this down and do a proper video about it in the next few days. Next weekend, I am doing a presentation at a local comic book convention where I'm doing a panel on Steve Ditko and Doctor Strange. So that's why I'm doing it live. I don't really have a lot of time to delve into a whole other subject when I've got to come up with an hour of material for that. But anyway, if this screen share is working right, you'll see that this is from Uproxx, the website. I'm not real familiar with it, but I found this on my Yahoo page when I was checking my internet. Excuse me, the news, just kind of looking around and stuff. And I have a huge problem with this. And hopefully if I keep my train of thought by the end of this video, I'm probably going to be pointing out some of my biases and making sure that I'm not being a hypocrite here, okay? But, you know, I look at news articles on the internet, much like I look at restaurants in the real world. I'm not going to go to McDonald's and expect a 5-star meal in service, like at a more expensive restaurant and things like that, fast food versus having cooks and stuff. But at the same time, I do expect to go to McDonald's and have them have the same, health health codes being followed, where I'm not going to die by eating their food. And that's how I feel about journalism of any sort. And yes, it's an internet article. Yes, I find them intellectually lazy. I find them lacking in research and fact checking. But I still think that anybody who was considered themselves a journalist or anything like that should have at least taken a semester at a community college in ethics and integrity of, being a journalist and stuff. And this is why this really bothers me. Now, let me see if this is going to work on the screen here. Let me pull this up, guys, so I can scroll down here and talk about what's going on here. Okay, now, like I said, if this is working, basically, we have another variant cover that people are feeling needs to be pulled down, and the whole topic here is sexualization of teenagers and stuff. And there's much broader issues, I think, that need to be taken on. Now, this apparently is a Midtown exclusive comic for Invincible Iron Man #1, where they got J. Scott Campbell to come in, and apparently he's being referred to as a pinup artist by this author. I think her name is Donna. Power of the internet. Anyway, her name is Donna. And she comes in here and she's talking about the sexualization of teens on comic book covers and talking about this cover needs to be pulled because she is wearing a crop top. Now, I'm looking at this and, she's covered. She's showing her navel and her belly. She is kind of curvy and stuff. So I'm not quite sure, but there's been a history with this, with what's been going on. And she also points out that the variant cover with the armor is $10 versus that regular cover. And here's J. Scott Campbell's, I guess, the variant cover armor or something like that, right? But as we go down, this author goes in to talk about, she's talking about her biases. She's approaching this from, I guess, being a mom. She says she has a 15-year-old. She's like, sorry, son, talking about the, teenagers are children, which they are. Even says, sorry, son, legally and emotionally, things she's wanting to point out. Then she goes through some cherry-picked selective art here, things that are taken out of context. She comes across to me as someone who is not involved in comics, thus that lack of research and being intellectually lazy, which I feel like to go through here. I guess this is the female Hawk. I can't remember her name, but the female version of Hawkeye with the Young Avengers, which the theme of that book was the next generation of, hired by the older generation and stuff, and progressively giving them their own stories and things. very much of a cult book, loved by a lot of people that tackled a lot of issues, homosexuality in teens, things that they're getting, that they're into and stuff. And then we get down to this one. It's from Teen Titans #1 back in the days of DC 52. And I'm not going to give the person I'm about to mention any free publicity or anything like that, because she actually, in my mind, had a platform years ago when this book came out, due to Wonder Girl's appearance there, and the anatomically incorrect boobs and things like that, and having her center and everything like that. A lady I believe she worked for Comic Book Resources, came up and was supposed to be doing a review of this book. And what she did was a huge backlash. This ended up being a can of worms that really got off the platform, which I think should have been discussed at the time. But she had a problem with the sexualization of this book. And if you compare that to the Iron Man book by J. Scott Campbell, where she has a crop top and showing a belly, I think there has been progress made. At least someone was listening, even if it was the higher ups of the comic book companies. But what happened was that she did not review the book. She attacked the artist in this image, and there was a huge backlash of public opinion that ended up resulting in a lot of death threats and rape threats that got really away from what the topic was. Just went nuts. And basically, in her article, the way I felt about it was that this woman had a platform as a journalist, however you want to call it, and she didn't review the book. She attacked the artist in this image due to the feelings that it created in her. Excuse me for using this word, it triggered her insecurities about her body image. And instead of working on herself, personal feelings and issues, she wanted to create censorship and just remove the things that which is completely wrong. You cannot change the world around you for the way it makes you feel about yourself. Whatever your insecurities are, if it's that damaging to you, you need to answer, why do I feel that way? Why do I have these images? Basically work on yourself. But on the other end of that, it ended up, the public opinion and backlash came out, and I saw true misogyny in there, and it ended up being straight, issues like using rape to threaten women and online harassment stuff. So basically, this turned into a real powder keg that just became real petty, and both sides came out looking horrible. Okay. So then we go on down, she picks another one here, and then we come down to this image by Michael Turner. Just amazing to me that my bias here is that I consider comic books and the artists that tell these stories, and a lot of these guys are self-taught, and a lot of these guys are trained, but there's always an X factor of talent that you get in there. And this is, of course, Supergirl, who is a teen. And this is the one that is kind of tricky, that is up for debate of all the images here, in my opinion, because of the context. First of all, this image, I believe, was from in interiors of a book, if not this one. So it's context. Second of all, the context of the story and the character of Supergirl is one for debate, and there could be a whole video just on the dynamics of the story of Supergirl. Now, what we're talking about here is that Supergirl has perpetually been seen since her debut in 1959 as a teen, we'll say 16 years old. This is, of course, from the 2000s, and they were reintroducing a Supergirl proper, and there's a whole history of Supergirl. We're going to focus on this one. Now, if you go with the history of what's going on here with Supergirl, is that you have to go back to the backstory. When Kal-El Superman was a babe, a little baby, the way, if you go back and look at the stories, he has, with the 80s, John Byrne had him in a gestation chamber and was not actually born until he arrived on Earth. And then if you go back across the comics, it's been said that, arguably Kal-El Superman was put in the rocket and sent to Earth when Krypton blew up when he was about 3. And then you get the timeline of how long it actually took Superman to travel to Earth. Be anything from 2 to 3 years 220 years, 250 years to actually, I've seen where they said 200,000 years. So biologically, Superman, I'm going to go with the 50-year mark because that was in the 80s, and that's just for me to get along with what I'm saying. But we'll say 50 years. Okay. So when Superman actually arrived on Earth, he would have been 53 years old if you go with that particular story. Even though he was biologically 3, he is actually a 53-year-old baby. Okay. Oh, older than the people who Martha and Clark Kent, or Martha and Jonathan that adopted him. Now in the story, Supergirl was a 16-year-old girl who had a nephew who we'll say is 3 years old, thus being 13 years older than him. She was sent to Earth traveling much of the same way Kal-El did to take care of him and find him if she found him. But when she arrived, Superman, for years, they were talking about how old Superman was in the comics as an adult. He was perpetually anywhere from 29 to 32. So we're going to say 30 years old just for the sake of argument. So when we arrive on Earth, Superman is biologically 30. Supergirl is biologically 16. Yet if you take in when they were born in the space travel and the ages, Supergirl is still 16 years older. That would have made her 46. So yeah, that's the context of here. We're going with an image out of context without knowing the backstory. And I'm going to move on from that because I'm hoping nobody really kind of, flipped out on that. I don't see anybody in the live chat, which is fine. This may be what's going on here. So we go on down to the next image. And I don't remember a whole lot about this image. I think this was a book that was pulled. This is Powerpuff Girls. This was a variant comic. Now, this one really kind of burns me up because I do think it was pulled. And this is the Powerpuff Girls, who are little girls in the cartoon. And I'm going blank on the artist, but I believe the artist that this is an homage to is a fantastic American artist who is female named Margaret Keane, who is famous for her big eyes art. Margaret Keane was apparently a huge influence on the creator of the Powerpuff Girls, to the point that the Powerpuff Girls teacher on the cartoon is named Miss Keane, if I'm remembering correctly. Thus, that was a little nod to her. And this cover is actually an homage to her. Thus, this comic got pulled, which is ridiculous because that could have brought a little bit of culture and a little bit of art history by exposing a whole generation of fans to a female artist who is just celebrated in the real world. Or censorship, So basically, we go on here and we talk. She gets into the cheesecake and that it's needed in Pinup's artists and bombshell covers and things. And my problem is I started looking at some of these comments from people that were left. And a lot of people are calling bullshit on it. Some people are referring to her as pearl clutcher, and it's starting to get ugly. Thus, if you've been on the internet, that's nothing new. But I think my problem is I approach this with my own biases that art is supposed to be something that gets you thinking. And yes, I consider comic books an art form of the 20th century all on their own. It is a genre of art. Think of movies. I have a problem with movie critics who do this. They have this collectivism in mind of what a movie and film are supposed to be. And over the years, it's broke down into genres. Thus, we have the name horror genre. If you watch the movie Scream, it points out rules of what makes a good horror movie. Yet, if you want to look at the genre of drama, that formula does not work. Thus, if you're going to do a critique of a horror movie, I think you need to understand the genre, thus with comics. But anyway, to me, all art kind of tells on you how it makes you react, what's your mindset. And if you look at images like these and your mind automatically goes to sexualization of teens, I think that says more about you than it does about the actual art. Now, there is right and wrong. There is things out there that are horrible. But just to prove my point, I'm going to talk about a book. I'm not going to switch over because the screen share is working, but there's a book by Alan Moore called Lost Girls. And he has taken fairy tales with his wife, Melina Gibby, I think is who did the art. And what they did is they admit that this book that they did together is pornography. To look at what comics had not touched, comics have been inspired by music. Comics have been made about movies. There have been novelizations that have been adapted to comics. There's been things that have influenced comics, and they want to talk about pornography. So what they did is they had 3 characters from 3 fairy tales meet as women, as adult women. And I think it was Alice of Wonderland, the girl from Peter Pan, Wendy, and I think Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and they're reminiscing of their sexual exploits as teenagers through those fairy tales. So this author, who wanted to make a point about having a problem with the sexualization of girls on comic book covers, missed the mark completely. And it's amazed Alan Moore himself, if I remember correctly, on how all of a sudden he does a book about pornography and expecting a lot of backlash, which there was some backlash when it comes to people who would and would not sell it. But he was surprised that all of a sudden this was considered art. So on top of these biases and going after these mainstream books and being trendy and trying to make clickbait with this article, there's a whole other section of books he could have went after to make his point. Thus, I think that would have been a better platform and have a better discussion. But instead, he goes for mainstream stuff in order to get views, and it just cheapens the whole ideal. And Alan Moore is really surprised on. I kind of wonder if it's an American standard of how sex is looked at and the European standard of how sex is looked at, because I think it actually surprised him how Lost Girls, which is what he has blatantly said is pornography, has been, reveled as being a work of art. Just kind of shows you what kind of crazy world we live in. So then we come down to this, if you guys are still hanging in there, we come down to this one guy's comment, which to a certain degree affected me more than the artwork, because what he said I agreed with, but the tone that he used and the venom in it really had me questioning myself. He's on down here. Let me find it. I think he's the next one. Yeah. This guy is Dr. Fancy Britches in here. What they have here is he says, "Oh, Lord, help. 15-year-old girls don't have boobs. I thought they didn't get those or hips until parents decided they could have them. Shame, shame, shame for anyone drawing a girl who is an 18-year-old with boobs. Sorry for the sarcasm, but your argument, though guided by a good father, mother, moral compass, is silly. Please direct me to your articles of disgust about Pink and Victoria's Secret selling underwear to teenagers. You think pieces about how cheerleading uniforms are too revealing. Your 3-part series explaining how old a girl should be before she can get her belly button pierced, or don't. Sit there and shame a comic book for making a woman look womanly, though I'll grant you, if the comic has been pulled, you've been vindicated and your moral standards confirmed. Women aren't actually women until they're 18. Now, I approach all of this from art. And this really made me think, is this how I sound? Though he's making a point of what he's saying, he gets his idea across. I don't want to be venomous like that. And that's probably why this article has stayed in my head, because I'm like, what is this saying about me? I'm pointing out how art makes other people feel and how it makes me livid when people go straight to sex a lot of times. Yet I'm wondering myself, am I doing the same thing? Am I being hypocritical? Is this person pointing out his views and interpretations and trying to put them out there with his biases, and I'm letting my biases say maybe he should be censored? I'm hoping that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I'm hoping that people who want to discuss things know what they're talking about, do a little research, have some integrity, and we can go from there. I feel like there is a right and wrong in this. And I feel like when art brings out feelings in you that are personal, you should not set out to destroy things that make you feel weird, but you should work on yourself. It's a gift for you getting some self-awareness about yourself. So I think this is why that stuck in my head. Am I doing the same thing? Why is this really bothering me? And I hope I'm being honest with myself. And by being able to say that and add that to the argument, I hope the people that write articles like this, I hope the people that see things that make them feel uncomfortable also do the same thing. Really think about, is it me? At least wonder. We're all wired certain ways. There's always going to be things that we don't like. There's always going to be things that make us uncomfortable, but we cannot lash out and do censorship. With some of my videos I made, specifically about like the SJW videos and stuff like that, quite a few people have caught on what I was actually doing. I was using the platform of comic books as a metaphor for real things that go on in real life. Because when it comes to things like censorship and all the things that are going on college campuses and stuff, a lot of people don't remember their history or took a history class, because when you have little movements like that, people are dismissing it, saying, oh, this is a non-issue. Oh, it's just comic books. It's just movies. These things always start out small. And then one day you wake up and all of a sudden you have some rights that have been taken away from you. And you're like, when did this happen? Why did I not see this coming? And it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Right now, I feel like we're in a time where a lot of this stuff is just trendy. It may go away. The hippies of the 60s scared everyone to death when Jefferson Airplane came on American Bandstand and they saw what was coming out of San Francisco. Fast forward 12 years, and Jefferson Starship is playing a song called Find Your Way Back that sounds like Boston. I think that, I'm not saying the sky is falling, but it just amazes me how we have these trends where people continue to try to censor things. And we've already been there. We have the First Amendment. We have laws. We have people who have discussed art. We have colleges, campuses that have real classes that, talk about art history and how people reacted to them. So anyway, man, that's the video. Thanks for everybody that's in the chat. Hopefully I can get in there and look at it. And thanks for just, hearing me. Now, when I watch this back, like I said, if there were audio problems or this screenshot didn't work, I'll upload this in a different format and talk about the same thing. Okay, guys, enjoy your Saturday. I hope everybody has a good weekend. And okay, later, guys.